Hello and welcome everyone to the Jubilee Times Open Seminar. I am your host Siddih Satav, and today we are here to explore a topic that is at the heart of every student's journey: how to achieve maximum utility from your time at university. Joining me is JP, a student in economics, Stan, a student in business, and someone who has dedicated his career to improving the student experience both inside and outside the classroom. Dr. Rashaad Shabab, the Director of Student Experience and award winning reader in economics at the University of Sussex. Dr. Rashaad, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me in the inaugural Jubilee Times sort of podcast. So I really appreciate it.
So, today we will cover four core areas: what universities offer beyond the classroom and how students can take full advantage of it, the impact of extracurriculars, leadership, and networking on personal and professional growth, the role of universities in shaping a fulfilling student experience, and how universities can better support students and prepare them for a life after graduation. So, let's jump in. So the first question which we have for you is a fundamental one. Why do people go to universities? Because there's an often a gap what students expect and what they actually experience. From your perspective, what do you think like students typically hope to get out of universities, and how is it different compared to the reality?
I think that's a fantastic question to start on, and I'm really grateful for to you for starting on that question, because I think we as a society are in a position where we get the answer to this question incomplete. So in the political discourse, when we sort of advise students at high school and things like that about university, very often it's framed in a sort of, many of you are economists, so in a human capital sort of based model, right? Where we say, you go to university, you learn lots of cool stuff, and you'll get a good job afterwards. So it's a very functional sort of relationship with university education. And I think that especially for subjects in the business school, that is correct, that what you learn here and what you do here will equip you with skills and knowledge that makes you sort of qualified for really important and interesting and fulfilling work. But also, I think it's also true that university isn't just an investment, right? I think university is also a remarkable privilege and a wonderful experience. So I think that especially you come to a place like Sussex with such a rich international student body, such a diverse student body, every sort of dimension of diversity that you can imagine, I think is represented well on our campus. And it's just that sort of place where you get to interact with so many different kinds of people in a really sort of intense and intimate setting, right? Where you get to know people well. For many people, it's their first time living outside of home. It's their first time living outside of the community they grew up in. And that sort of exposure to lots and lots of different people from lots and lots of different backgrounds, I think changes you fundamentally as a person. And I think that enrichment, that personal enrichment, is a big part of what people get out of university that's often overlooked. I think the academics are important, but the academics provide the scaffolding around which we build that enrichment, right? So I think it's really important for people to remember that is a major purpose of university to the individuals who come to study here. With society as a whole, I think universities serve another very important purpose related to that purpose, right? One of the things we studied in the Topics in Growth and Inequality module was about how important economic connectedness is in driving upward social mobility, right? And what's wonderful about universities is that diversity, it is that you can make friendships with people from backgrounds so profoundly different from yours, and those friendships constitute for a society that economic connectedness. It's an important engine of generating economic connectedness and thus upward social mobility. So I think there are reasons that people should bear in mind about coming to university that are often not given the primacy they deserve, personal reasons, but also we as a society, when we talk about universities and the value they bring to students in our society at large, I think that's also often overlooked. So thanks for an excellent question.
I think on that note, sorry if I cut in. I think it's as you say, like we do think of university coming out of high school. It's like as an investment. It's like, oh, this will give you better career prospects. It'll mean your quality of life in general is better. And I do think that even like being here now, I think it's interesting because for me, when I think about it, you meet so many different kinds of people, and I think in a way you do pick and choose, so you end up in a different setting than you would have anticipated. But I also think there's so much more than you would expect because you learn so many different facets of life. You also talked about how for a lot of people it's their first time being away from home, especially for such an extended period, because it's like, I mean, even if you were ever to start a job, if you didn't like it within, I don't know, 6 months or a year, you might leave. But this is like 3 years at least for everybody who comes here. So it's quite a commitment, and it's also, I think, a commitment to ourselves. And for me, I think what's really important as well regarding like the background is that there can be so much personal growth involved in it. As you say, with like meeting other people and developing different connections with people with extremely different backgrounds. I'm just thinking of like me and JP, for instance, who have grown as quite close friends, and we have very different backgrounds. We come from different families and things like that. And I think that's always quite interesting. So in any case, I think there's so much more to it than appears initially. And I think that it is more than an investment, as you say, yeah.
I think we also, just some of the things you touched upon there bear sort of fleshing out. I mean, how many of you did laundry before you came to uni?
I did.
I didn't, right? I did not, right? It's so keeping your clothes clean, managing that, cooking for yourself, managing a budget, managing adult relationships, romantic or otherwise, right? These are all really important developmental steps that happen when someone is at university. So I think when we restrict our view of what students are learning at university to just the narrow confines of a classroom or an exam script, I think we're not giving them enough credit, right? And I think we're not celebrating enough of the growth that's happening sort of at university. So very, very interesting stuff.
Oh, sorry. So I think just tipping into what you said, because if you mentioned some good things on managing life and etc. I realized that people mostly think of the financial aspect of university, like the investment needed financially and the return to the investment. It's getting more expensive, it's getting more difficult. But then now that you mention it, there is so much that you actually learn from actually coming to university that I would assume if you were out there in the open world, you might not have learned it. So for example now, managing your laundry, true. Learning how to manage your finances, that was my biggest challenge. In my first year, I could not manage my finances. I was bankrupt every single week. But then after some time, I learned this is how you manage yourself, this is how you take care of yourself. So maybe a tip for people that say, that shy away from university is that you actually learn a lot of intrinsic things from actually coming to university in the first place. So, yeah.
Let me tell you a story, if I may, of when I was an undergraduate. I was so terrible with managing my money. I'm sort of, I think, I'm a little bit embarrassed to share this story, but I think it's important for us to be sort of authentic about the challenges that we face. And it was such a long time ago, and I've grown so much since then. I think I feel comfortable sharing it, right? I would, when I ran out of money, I would ask my friends for money, right? And I borrowed maybe $30 from this person, $40 from that person. Then my next installment of my sort of scholarship would come through, and I'd sort of pay them off. And then it got to this point where one of my friends who was studying finance, he said, let's consolidate Rashaad's debt. I'll buy up his debt for 50 cents on the dollar, right? And he'd go around and he'd say, so Rashaad owes me the money and you guys got 50 cents on what you lend him out, right? But I think I felt a lot of shame in that moment. And I felt like I just couldn't make it work. I just didn't have the discipline to make it work. But, like you say, it was something I learned at that time. And by the end of that time, I was in a position where I could sort of balance my books, live within my means and things like that. And then when you go beyond being a student and you get a real paycheck and you start sort of saying, well, I have to save for retirement, but you know what, I deserve a shiny new car, right? Those trade-offs, that discipline is then in place. That is not necessarily in place for people who haven't had that safe, managed transition. I should also say there is a financial advisor, right, available at the student center, right? So, anybody who's listening to this and is potentially struggling, do go to the University of Sussex Student Center and say you'd like to speak with the person who gives sort of advice on finances. There are also online resources on the Student Hub. And of course, we here in the school are here to help you. Come to us.
For example, Sussex University.
Yeah, thank you. I do believe that many students think, going to university is about exams, assignment, back-to-back lectures, and they just think about the academics and leaving beyond the classroom aside. So in your perspective, are there any key opportunities at the university, or when you were at university, were there any opportunities that you thought you overlooked, or which students right now often overlook beyond academics?
What a fantastic question. I think university is so rich and dynamic, and there's so much going on that the hard question is, what do I choose not to do, right?
Yeah.
So for me, as an educator, I think the most important thing to do is show up at class, right? Make sure you're going to class. I know that all our lectures are recorded, and I know that a lot of our seminars have supplementary materials that are designed to help, students who, for whatever reason, aren't able to make it to class. Perhaps they have a disability, perhaps they have a flare-up in an underlying condition. We want to make sure that our education is accessible to them, so we put resources there that'll help them catch up. What I sometimes see is, though, these resources being misused by students who choose not to show up to class, who think that all they're getting out of class are those lecture slides and the sort of hard skills and knowledge, right? And then they can use that time to do other things, and there are genuine financial pressures on students today. Students need to work part-time. Many of them need to work much more than I'm comfortable with, right? That's the situation we find ourselves in. But I think part of going to class is also the discipline of showing up every day. Part of going to class is being on a crowded bus, right? And, trudging through the rain, building that resilience, being comfortable integrating with society at a time when it's so easy for us just to be sort of locked in our screens, right? It's building that resilience, but also, if you show up early, you get a good seat, you get the seat that you want. If you show up late, you don't. It's sitting still and listening to someone for an extended period of time. It trains yourself to build that concentration. It doesn't come naturally to any of us. It's a skill that you have to build over time, right? When you're catching up with a lecture online, it's a screen this big. You've got half a dozen other tabs open, right? And that screen is designed to distract you, right? It's designed by very, very clever sort of psychological tools to grab your attention away from whatever it is you're trying to concentrate on. The lecture theatre is designed to concentrate your attention on the lecture. it builds that skill of sustaining concentration that you're going to need going forward. You learn how to interact with other people who you're not familiar with, right? From different backgrounds from you. When you're in a seminar, you learn how to speak in front of a room, how to command attention in a room. Those are essential employability skills, right? And the love of your life might have been in that seminar room, and you would never have met them because you left. Your future business partner might have been in that seminar room, right? The key reference that you needed for your dream job might have been in that seminar room, and you've missed making that connection because you viewed education as something that's an overly narrow set of hard skills and competences that can be assessed on a piece of paper, right? So, yeah, I think that's, with all of these pressures, I worry very much that students are tempted or pushed away from the classroom. I think if you're going to class, then, if you can manage that time, then add other things, right? Then add things like the wonderful work you're doing with the student societies, Jubilee Times, the Economic Steering Group. Think about placements, think about internships, engage with the careers team, engage with society, stuff you're interested in. It doesn't all have to be functional, right? There's if you love dogs, right? There's sort of a doggy cuddle session that the university puts on, right? There's invest in taking care of yourself. Invest in taking care of yourself. And I don't mean necessarily mental health days where you decide not to go to lecture. I mean proactively going out and getting some exercise, right? Making the healthy choice at the supermarket. Getting together with friends even when it's cold and wet and it's easy enough to just turn on Netflix and spend the evening at home. Go out, interact with people. It's good for you to do that, right? I think we're in a really difficult situation where everything has a label, and these labels can be helpful, but with the free access to these labels online, we diagnose ourselves with everything.
It's dangerous.
Exactly.
To what you're saying, there's three things I want to say. First was serendipity. We were talking about this in a lecture I had for new venture creation, which is just like the act of being at the right place at the right time. And I think much of that has to do with putting yourself in the right place at the right time. It's, as you say, doing these things that might be challenging, but where it's healthy. And then there's you were talking about the comfort of being able to stay home and then look at the lecture slides later, but that's not really going to help you. Like, I think it's the discomfort, the challenges almost that come with life that are going to help you. And you're also saying how it's important that we be in situations and seminars and lectures and stuff like that where we kind of commend, I want to say, the power to just get up and talk about whatever's going on. And it's kind of sad, to be honest with you, because I'm a business student. I network like crazy. I'll ask anybody for their LinkedIn shamelessly as well. But what's crazy to me is how little students are actually up and active and talking in class, talking in seminars. They're just sometimes I've raised my hand 5 or 10 times when the professor asks a question, and then I have to do it again because I feel bad because nobody else is talking, nobody's making that commitment because everybody sees it as a transaction, and it's dangerous. It's not. People aren't looking at it as a community where you can learn and grow. And I know I can be a bit cynical sometimes myself, but I think it's important that we challenge ourselves and each other in these ways by speaking up, by being active, by doing these things like socializing. And now especially with the weather for the last 3 months, it's rough to push yourself to get out of bed and go do the thing is healthy for you to do, and kind of take care of yourself in that way. And then what you were saying about labels as well, I think resonates so much with our generation, with Gen Z, is I don't know, I'm tired, so I have this, or I'm hungry, so I have that. There's too much information. We have too much to where we could, and this is going to sound quite cynical once again, but I think it's true, we can use any kind of diagnosis as an excuse to stop ourselves from doing what we know we should be doing. And it happens so regularly. And I feel like with university, it's the same thing. You come in day one, first lecture, Monday morning, everybody's there. And then you come in on week 10, and there's like 5% of the classes there. It's dismal. It's so true, though. I'm sure you've seen it at certain times, and it must be demoralizing for professors and lecturers as well to see that, because once again, we have invested like quite a lot of money, of time, of resources into being here, that it's unfortunate. And it's, as you say, it's a challenging time. It's dangerous because we have so many distractions, and we allow ourselves to be distracted as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. To your point about the sort of classroom dynamic, right? I spoke a little bit earlier about the personal motives that people have. You need to learn how to engage a room, right? You personally. But there's also a spillover. The power of a university isn't just, the brilliant colleagues that I have, right? What's great about a university, half of what I learned from my university experience was from other people. It was from that classroom. So by choosing to stay quiet and not share that unique perspective that each person brings to the classroom, right? They're robbing everyone else of the benefit of that perspective. So it's not just something personal. There's a group dynamic that's set off there, and I would just love for our students to be more sort of not all of them. Many of you are wonderful, right? He wasn't even enrolled in my class, right? But he'd participate, right? So not to do a disservice to the wonderful students who do participate, such as yourself and such as those of you in this room, but I really think that we could all learn so much more
From each other.
Yeah.
Well, I think these are very good points being raised, like 100%. But there's this issue of, first of all, COVID-19 changed the landscape of education, everything completely. People forgot how to be human beings. They forgot how to say hello, hi, to socialize, to be normal. The norm changed in my perspective. Things changed before and after the COVID-19. Now people are afraid to have a conversation in public. Like now, if I'm in Christmas, that whole Christmas holiday period, and I'm at home 247, I go to church, I come back. When I see everyone again, there's this anxiety that comes into my space. I'm like, what do I do? What is going on? How do I forget the normal things that happen? So just imagine during that whole period, 2 years, 1 year plus, so many people forgot how to interact with others. They now came to university. The heightened things of, like you said, the spillover effect. If you have good people surrounding you that go to lecture, it will spill over to you and say, okay, since these people are going, I might as well go. If one person speaks in the lectures, if he's speaking, I can speak. And if it's wrong, bonus points for me because I'm not afraid to speak anymore in lectures. Like me, if I have an issue in my lectures, trust me, I would speak up and say I'm wrong or I'm right. Sometimes I'm so scared to do it because of I'm wondering what to be the effects of me speaking up. Would they think I'm dumb? Would they think I'm stupid? Things like that. But then remember, this is for people to say, remember, you came here for a purpose. It's better you feel dumb or stupid now than to not understand what you're doing. Because I can promise you, not just me, but 1 million people or 1,000 people behind you or wherever do not understand the same thing. But they don't have the courage to speak up. But if you have that courage to speak up, do it, because no one's going to mock you. The person that is even going to try and mock you, everyone else will mock them instead, because they're all trying to learn the exact same thing. So just a tip, put yourself out there to your best capacity and always find people that support your right decisions, not the people that what's called limit your capabilities in the university experience. That's my opinion on that matter.
And I think the discomfort is real, right? But I'm not sure anxiety is the right word for that discomfort, right? I think we feel anxious, you know what I mean? But every opportunity for personal growth is inherently uncomfortable, I believe.
No, 100%.
I think if you go to the gym, if you're training your muscles, if you're training to run, whatever you do, right? It's only when you're in that zone where you're sort of really struggling, that's where the gains come.
Yeah.
Right? It's either lift to failure, or if you're doing endurance training, it's for your VO2 max, it's where your lungs feel like they're about to explode, right? That's where you have to hit to get the maximal sort of gains. I think our intellectual gains are just like that. If you're just doing something easy and you're solving it like that, you're not learning, or you're not at the limit of how much you can learn. I think it's when you're agonizing over it. I just can't get it to fit. Why isn't this working? And then you have that eureka moment, and it clicks after hours. I think that's the other thing. It takes hours, right? You have to give it that time. I think very often we tell ourselves, "Oh my God, I can't do this. That clever person over there solved it in 2 minutes. It's taking me an hour."
Yeah, comparison's a thief of the joy. It's terrible.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're not that person. You're clever. Your cleverness takes time. You're not stupid. Just stick with it assiduously, right? And get to where you need to be and embrace that discomfort, be it on the bus, be it at the start of term, when you're just, inundated by 1,000 faces in your classroom. Yeah. So
to that, sorry, Jeff.
Oh no, on building the discipline, which you talked about earlier, this is something what my dad told me before getting to university. He's like, it's not important what subject you study, because he studied mechanical engineering and went on into a real estate business. So it's like, it's not what subject you study at the university, but it's the pressure that builds you to work hard, which makes you, like, as you said, getting up in the morning, going to the lectures, being there, being in universities where there are days I'm in the uni from 9 to 5.
Yeah.
So working those hours, getting used to those hours will help you connect, will help you become better by yourself. So that is what I feel is another important skill or important outcome from university, which you get, but most of the students neglect that. They feel that, oh, why do I have to get up at 9 a.m.? Like, why do I have to get there?
it feels very laissez-faire after a very structured school day to just have, oh wait, I've got 12 hours of contact time a week and I can party however much in between, right? But you should enjoy university. You should enjoy that flexibility. Managing your own time is, again, something you learn, right? That's something to learn, but that time does have to be managed. You have to find time to do the homework, to do the readings, to spend those 3 hours on that one problem that doesn't get solved. So yeah, your dad sounds like a very wise and impressive man.
Yeah, he is indeed. So moving on to our next question. How well do you think the university circular reflects the skills which students actually need after graduation?
That's a very interesting
Especially
question.
in the job market scenarios like today. Do you think that the alternative assessments such as the one which you had, the podcast, or maybe a presentation would share, like, what do you think, are those approaches very effective?
I think that in you're all business school students, right? So by the nature of what you're studying, it's sort of inherently oriented to giving you good career prospects, right? All the subjects we teach here are subjects that employers value, right? So I think that's something that's sort of really important to sort of understand, that the core curriculum itself is designed to give you skills and technical knowledge that enhances your employability. I think with the different sort of innovative ways of assessing people, I think it's really important that we embrace lots of different ways of sort of assessment. I love marking the podcasts, right? And trust me, I'm marking the CEXs now. For those of you who don't speak Sussex speak, that's the computer-based exams, right? And it's great to see how much students have learned, but there's no joy to it, right? Listening to the podcast, there was genuine joy, right? So for context, as part of my Topics in Growth and Inequality module, students do a 3-minute micro podcast about a topic related to inequality that's tied to something substantive that we covered during the class. And these are really, really enriching. They're really, really interesting. Students learn how to do a podcast. Maybe some of you that was your first cut at sort of audio editing, at storyboarding, at coming up with a narrative, and at editing to get it down to time. With so much of business interactions with customers and other businesses going online, I think that's something that's sort of a really important set of skills. I think with AI, coming on to the presentation, I think with AI, a lot of what machines can do, machines will do. But I think at the end of the day, we will still crave that human contact and that human connection. And I think key decisions are going to be made by people who are capable of persuading other people. Be that through evidence, be that through that presence in the room that we talked about, be that through all of these 101 other soft skills that comprise your quote-unquote employability after you graduate. And the classroom and our varied assessment diet, I think, is an important sort of tool to building that. I would, since you brought up assessments, I would also like to sort of talk a little bit about the old school unseen exams, right? Which are making something of a comeback. And that, some students say, well, some educators say, why are we doing this? This is so antiquated. People get so much anxiety about it. It's so stressful. And it's sort of seen to be sort of inauthentic in some ways, that when you're in a job, nobody's going to sit you down in a room and tell you to, lock up all your books and tell you to write for 2 hours, right? So how is that authentic? I think that setting builds a number of sort of crucial skills. I think number one is repeated exposure to the material enhances your retention. So when you're cramming for a closed book test, right, after you've been to lecture and seminar all semester, before the assessment period, when you're going over all that material, that repeated exposure actually enhances your fluency in that material. If you're an economist who's giving a press conference, you don't have access to your books. You're talking on the fly in that moment based on material that you've built competency and fluency in earlier, right? And that's something that, yes, we could assess by a viva, but I dare say many students would find a viva even more stressful than an unseen exam, right? So you get to test that fluency in that sort of time-constrained sort of space. Why is it time-constrained? Because being succinct attracts a premium. When we go to sort of students and job markets and things like that, we say, what's your elevator pitch? That means you've got 90 seconds to tell somebody what's awesome about you, right? Or what's awesome about your idea. So that succinctness is another skill, on the fly, thinking, reacting. So I think for these reasons, I think the unseen exam is actually quite an authentic mode of assessment. And of course, I believe employers, with the threat of AI, I think employers will put a premium on students who they know have been assessed that this is something you produced under a controlled setting.
I think, I'm thinking about interviews now, actually, because you're saying about this whole, being succinct, being in the moment, especially. I recently talked to a friend about how I had an interview for a university, and he was like, oh, and I was like, I have no idea what the questions are going to be. I've been given no information, probably because they're trying to use it as like an intimidation tactic or something like that, or just kind of to see how people are when it's like their backs against the wall and it's just answering, excuse me, answering based on intuition. And I was like, that is such an important skill to develop. It's the same thing as like, as presenting, I think without flashcards even, because it's like, it's in the moment, it's like, it's the fluidity, because it's very different if you're presenting to a group of people and you're reading off flashcards, like they're not going to be engaged because you're not really engaged. You're not really like letting it free flow. You're not in that flow state. But then if it's you and really like what you know and what you've retained and what you've developed and kind of your own, let's say it's like a language, it's your own version of the language, then it becomes that much more interesting because it's what you were saying before about like your perspective and how that's different from anybody else's perspective. And I think that's incredibly important. So I also think that these like on the spot examinations are important. I think podcasts are great as well because I mean you can record it a million times, but at the end of the day, like if you know what you're talking about and you're kind of just going through the motions, it allows your mind to be creative versus I don't know certain questions that might be very restrictive. So in any case, I think that's really important. And the elevator pitch, once again, all these things, it's just like what can you do on the moment based on what you've developed in yourself, what you have inherently, and what you can do with it, what you've learned and do with it, how you've meshed it together. All those things I think are incredibly important.
Well, think of a person, let's go through a thought exercise. You're an important person at a company, right? You've got someone who's coming to you either for a contract or a job or something else. They want something from you. They want a claim on some of the resources that you've got. You've got one person who is fluent, right? Who's done their due diligence, done their homework, is ready to lock eyes with you, spend their entire attention reading your body language and reacting to it because they don't need to spend their time looking at a bunch of cards. They can keep their eye on you the whole time.
Yeah, of course.
Who's going to be more compelling? Who are you going to build more, feel more trusting? Who do you feel more visible to, right? So that fluency, I think, really matters. I think it really, really matters. And it comes down to sort of due diligence. Have you spent the time and effort in, there's a Bob Dylan line, I'll know my song well before I start singing. Have you learned your song before you start singing, right? And so, I think it's really, really important in terms of the way potential employers or business partners will perceive our students in the labor market.
I think the two key things that I caught from this whole speech is that it's about being uncomfortable, because of all these type of things put you in an uncomfortable situation where you actually have to push yourself beyond your limits or hit a boundary where you actually have to put in a lot of effort to get better. And without being uncomfortable, without hitting that boundary, you don't know the next stage of your process, next stage of your life, or all those type of little steps that you take. So like now, for example, I did an internship last year, and I tell you the amount of on-the-spot questions they asked me on data analysis, because I told them I did data coding, and the first meeting we had was, I had someone here did data coding, and that's why we got you here. And the camera just panned to me, and all of a sudden I just remembered I had a presentation that was similar to this, where everyone looked at me, I wasn't ready for the presentation, but then I remembered, if I know of something, let me speak of that one thing I know. So all of a sudden, I rambled about the same thing on how I use Python, I use this. So in that aspect, some things that we actually learn from university, the exam structures, actually prepare us for the real world, because there are time constraints. Time is money. 2 hours examination, some are very difficult, but then it actually reflects on the real world. Your boss will tell you, could you do this in 2 hours? Is it that you say yes or you say no? And if you say no, what happens to you? You get things more difficult. One no becomes another no. So we learn from all these difficult experiences in university to help us out in the real world based on what I've actually experienced by myself. So I think it's very important that there's a variety of options in ways we test our skills in university. For example, the podcast, the in-person exams, the presentations, the going around to what's it called, interviews, various methods. All these things prepare us for the real world, whether we believe it or not. And if we actually pay attention just a little, we'll actually see that aside from even the real world, it helps us in our interpersonal lives, how to communicate, how to view other people in different senses, how to think critically when you see certain situations. And that is what I feel is my opinion on this.
No, I think management experience sort of at the university has made me a better father. You know what I mean? Like it's just how do you sort of manage the different sort of things that come up, things that you can't imagine, right? As a dad with kids who are sort of completely unpredictable, right? It's there are a million questions you'll never see coming, and it's how do you react when you're at the limits of your knowledge, right? Yeah.
Okay, so Dr. Shabab, what would be the one major change that you would like to bring in to student experience in order to improve the overall student experience for students at Sussex?
I would have all students call me by my first name, Rashaad.
Okay.
No. But to get to the substantive sort of part of your question, I think what I would do if I had a magic wand was I would show students, I would make students aware of the incredible value that their contribution to our community brings. I would have sort of class attendance go up to 95, if not 100%, because occasionally you do get sick, right? I would take away the fear of failure from students. I would have students understand that learning, thriving, excelling, reaching your full potential, all of these things that happen on the very frontier of your capabilities are risky, unpredictable, uncomfortable, and challenging, right? And to sort of thrive within that zone of healthy discomfort, right? We don't want students to take on so much that they're completely overwhelmed and unable to sort of manage what they need to deliver. But we do want students to be at that point where learning is taking place, right? Where growth is taking place. And like we've spoken about before, that comes with a certain degree of discomfort. I would have every student see the value that their unique perspective and lived experience brings to our academic community. Every person here is different. Every person is unique. And there's what you may see as a weakness or something bad that's happened to you in the past is something that if you shared it with the class in particular contexts, right, that could be used to enhance the learning of everybody in that class. So I think that trust in the institution, in our fellow students, in each other, that sort of resilience to thrive in this zone of discomfort, and the engagement that you've all got. You're putting this together. All of you were excellent in class. Some of you even came to classes that you weren't assigned to. Thank you. It was a pleasure having you. So I don't want to do a disservice to the wonderful body of students who are incredibly engaged, right? I celebrate you and I appreciate you, but I think there are other students who we need to do a better job of bringing them to enhance and enrich our community as well. So if there was one thing I would change, that would be it.
All right. So we talked about different kinds of students coming to Sussex, and some of them are more engaging, some of them are less engaging, and with a lot more of AI earlier coming into the market. Like we talked about AI earlier. So what do you think institutions are doing to adapt quickly to different students, to the different needs of the students? And do students need to take some more responsibility to develop their own skill set?
AI it's one of those things that's transforming so much, and the technology is developing so rapidly that it feels sort of difficult to even come up with something coherent to say about it that's going to stay contemporary for the next 3 months, right? But I think there are some general principles we can glean from this, right? I think if we look at sort of universities and education as regurgitating existing knowledge, that no longer is a university level skill, really, right? Because AI can generate that knowledge, in part at some basic level of fluency, right? For everybody, some basic level of competence. I think what we need to ask ourselves is, in addition to that factual knowledge, what do we imbue our students that enables them to reflect on society around us and deliver something that AI can't deliver? And I think for economics, I'm an economist, you've been in my growth and inequality module. When it comes to a subject like economics, the danger of AI, I think, is even more pronounced because it gives you the illusion of knowledge, right? Economics is about human beings, and perspectives differ. And AI, by its sort of algorithmic nature, the way the probabilities sort of are computed, of sort of the probabilistic models of what to say next is built, it prioritizes the loudest and most pervasive voices online over the reasoned, less, voices that perhaps have less sway and perhaps have less sort of exposure. And so as social scientists, when we're choosing very sensitive and sort of very, very, often profound trade-offs and choices that society has to make, if our students were to then rely on AI to make those decisions, I think that's a very, very dangerous place for society to be, right? Which is why I think we need to make sure that the core knowledge, the micro, macro, stats, metrics, that stuff needs to be sort of taught and assessed in a way that's robust to AI. And then the way, subjects where you put that together, I think we need to teach students how to use AI effectively, right? Otherwise, I think anyone doing any job is probably going to be less productive than they could be if they had AI fluency, right? So I'm not on the bandwagon that says AI is going to take all our jobs. I don't think that's the case. I think human beings will continue to value human input and human contact, right? I think on a sort of, animal brain level, we crave social connectedness and contact, and that will continue to be the way business is done and society is organized and important decisions are made. What we need to do is make sure that we're not creating unthinking sort of people automatons who just chuck something into AI, there's an answer, that's my report done. I think when people like that get put into positions where they can make decisions, I think that is incredibly dangerous, right? Especially for a social science like economics, right? I think we need to have our students be fluent in, using AI as a tool, but then that core subject knowledge with that gate-kept knowledge, right? Say, this is peer-reviewed research, this is something that is sort of, other people have said, yes, they've done this right? I think that continues to be even more important than it was before, because otherwise we risk sort of a sea of misinformation developing and a sea of sort of things that have the appearance of being true, that look like the truth, that look like facts, right? That get amplified on social media, that get spat out by AI, but that aren't true and aren't facts and aren't sort of sensitive to the needs of this type of society that we would like to build.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I've heard one of our professors being like, use AI, but as a calculator. Just because calculators came into market, that didn't mean that mathematicians had no jobs, right? So using AI as a calculator would be like something which we all need to learn.
Mm. I think it's like it should be maybe a catalyst of your own core ideas and something that you use to kind of like draw them out. If you have, I don't know, I think the original ideas have to come from us and like kind of, but then you could maybe use AI to like structure them in a way, obviously depending on the topic, but in any case we have to be the ones coming up with the ideas, 'cause otherwise it's just regurgitation of potential misinformation. Whereas like if it comes from us, I think it's a lot more authentic. It's probably easier to write about. You probably waste less time doing it as well, because it's a lot more of a flow state as opposed to asking ChatGPT to answer your essay question for you.
And just going back to something we were talking about before, about we've explored the functional aspects of the limits of AI. But you mentioned that flow state, right? And I think that's really important. Writing as a creative process is incredibly pleasurable, right? When I get a sentence down in a paper that says, or an article or something, or even just writing the description for the assessment, right? When I get it down and say, this is exactly what I mean to say, that's pleasurable. It's not just about can AI do it, but it's that I enjoyed doing it. And I worry that we're missing the sort of joy of writing, of playing with language. I worry that that's something that people who just use AI will never discover that joy.
Yeah.
That flow state that you mentioned.
Yeah, so coming back to university, so I feel that university culture plays a huge role in shaping students' life and his student engagement. So have you ever observed that the role of university culture has been either encouraging or discouraging participation?
Oh goodness, this question hits right here. I came to Sussex to do a master's degree, but something that I don't always tell people, or that people don't always know, is it wasn't my first attempt at a master's degree, right? I went to study a very prestigious MSc on a fully funded scholarship at a very prestigious institution, one of the world's most prestigious institutions, due to sort of what I now realize were personal and mental health difficulties, and being in sort of a bad relationship, and it was just a bad time in my life, a difficult time in my life. I don't think bad is the right word. I wasn't able to sort of complete that degree, but the culture there was also very, very aggressive, Darwinian. It was sort of, if you can't survive the competition, it was sort of, at induction, look to your left, look to your right. One out of the three of you will fail before this degree is over, right? It was that kind of academic culture. And I see the merit in competition, right? Every economist worth their salt will believe that competition helps deliver good outcomes within limits, right? And given X, Y, Z assumption. So I believe in competition, I really do. But what that culture did for me at that stage of my life was that it was completely crushing. It negatively reinforced every negative emotion I was struggling with, every bit of self-doubt, right? Every whisper of I can't do this was reinforced on an institutional level, right? When I came to, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. My family were wonderful. I met, a woman who went on to be my wife and the mother of my children and my life partner, and I got better. And then I came back to the UK, again to study economics, to wrestle this beast and to say, yes, I can do this now. And Sussex was completely different. I never, I can't remember once being made to feel like the fear of failure should be motivating me, right? My MSc cohort was suddenly supportive, and we were helping each other with our homework instead of trying to sabotage each other's interviews at JP Morgan, right? Suddenly people like enjoyed helping each other. Faculty were sort of, you've got something important and meaningful and valuable to add, right? I was encouraged to participate in my own time, and that for me was completely transformational. And so I came here to do a 10-month MSc, and 13 years later, 2 children, and half a career here I still am, because of the culture of the institution. So to answer your question, yes, I think the culture of an institution is incredibly important. I celebrate Sussex for the fantastic work that we do in creating a culture that's inclusive and supportive. I really worry sometimes that in trying to be inclusive, we're actually excluding people from support, right?
Amen.
I think if it's great that we've got lots of different people with lots of different backgrounds and varying abilities here, but we have to support those people to thrive. And if someone has, let's say, anxiety about going to class, and we say, it's okay, you don't need to come to class, we're not helping them overcome that anxiety. We're excluding them from the opportunities that coming to class brings. So that is something I struggle with. But at the same time, if someone is incapable of coming to class, we have to support them somehow as well. So it's a very delicate and difficult issue, and I think something we will continue to struggle with.
We talked about that, JP and I. We spoke about it. I think a few weeks ago. Remember we saw at the student center we saw like a neuro-friendly environment for people to meet and all that. And we were like, this is great because I mean it's a good outlet. They can meet each other. They can make new friends and everything. But it's also kind of like you're putting a certain group of people that are neurodivergent in a box, and it's also dangerous because in that capacity you're kind of excluding them from this huge community that could be a part of. And as much as it's a very hard thing to balance out. It's a pendulum almost. It's you could meet a lot of good people, but you could also be kind of in your mind closing yourself to this idea that you couldn't meet any people outside of this box that you've been put in. So it's kind of, I think it's always been a big difficulty. And as you say, like overcoming the challenges, the fears and everything to be able to live harmoniously as a part of society, I think is extremely important.
I mean, thank you. That's really a thoughtful example, and I'm glad we've got, people like you who are reflecting on how the institution can support people with differences, right? But I think you're right. It is very, very tricky. I mean, my hope would be that once people have a community of support, potentially of like-minded people, that they then feel confident and comfortable enough to go beyond that group, right? And that they can equip each other with the skills that they need to thrive, to their full potential and to the full benefit of our community here in Sussex.
Yeah. So on that topic, I think because of this issue is actually starting off from an earlier stage where secondary schools too, they do the same process. So I was and still am a cover supervisor for secondary schools because I do love to teach. It's something that's a passion of mine. But then I realized that, for example, by trying to be inclusive, we actually exclude people that actually need the help more. For example, now there was a kid that had issues with writing and reading. He can't write, he cannot read, and the school suggested that there was no need to to make him try to write or read. That all he just does is listen in the classes and move on. And this kid, I'm so blessed that happened to me, because this kid approached me and said, "Oh, sir, please, could you come and help me understand what this is?" So I literally told the whole class, "Okay, most of you already know what to do. I'm going to keep this person in charge because of he's the prefect, so I trust his capabilities to continue the class." I went to the kid and we went line by line, word by word on that whole page. And I tell you, I kid you not, he was so happy. He was so interested. He was making progress even faster than the ones that were actually there. So the issue is not just that some people do not want to, or they don't have the capacity to actually learn. They just don't have the necessary resources to do so. Or the way that we put it out there is that their problems are beyond or are beyond our capacity, or in a different category than ours. But realistically, everyone has problems, and our solutions can be interlinked in one way or another. And once you're putting these people in the same, and not even these people, once you're putting anyone in the same environment, you should not make them feel different. You should make them feel the same in that aspect. There's so many instances in secondary schools where a kid cannot communicate in class. They say, and the kid will say, "Oh, I don't talk in class because I feel anxious and shy." And I told this young lady, "Listen, if you're going to do university, if you're going to do A-levels, going to presentation, when you go into the real world, you find people to talk to, and no one is going to protect you or defend you the way you think it's going to happen here. That you can start from baby steps, talking to the people beside you, and not." Tell me why the next class I had with this girl, she was the chief talker. She was one that was saying, "Oh, sir, I thought that was answered there." She was so happy to speak up because of her and her friends were together doing it. So I just feel like, I think the way we think about solutions like this, I think we're thinking about it from our own point of view. We should put ourselves in their perspective and think about it. The same way I didn't even know of that new that whole neuro, I don't know how to pronounce it, I'm very bad at pronouncing it. The neurodivergent situation on the board. And I wouldn't have thought of a solution to that because of it doesn't concern me. If you think about it logically as a human being, that is not my forte. But he's saying, I was like, "Oh, this doesn't make sense." I was like, that is true, because of why exclude them when they didn't ask to be excluded. Same way I'm left-handed. I didn't know of the violin was to be played on the right side. You realize issues when they are specific to you. So for you to make solutions specific to people, you have to involve those people that actually go through that same problem. That's a solution I think we should incorporate at institution level, and even at the starting up level, the foundation, primary schools, secondary schools.
On that note, I'm reading this book right now called The Courage to be Happy, which I recommend. It's a very difficult read, but it's really good. And one thing they talk about as far as education, educators, is an educator's role really is to make the person that they're educating self-sufficient in life, you know. Yeah. So you were talking about this girl who went on to be like, you know, the chief leader in the following talk, and how it was really helpful. In any case, it's kind of like we have to concern ourselves more with other people's concerns to truly understand them. And so I think that is like an incredibly important point, that as in education at this university, at secondary level, primary level, whatever it may be, is that the educators look for a way to make everybody feel like they could be self-sufficient in the world after the matter of the fact. Yeah.
All right, so this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. To wrap up, we discuss about the importance of university in students' life, going forward to the misunderstanding when it comes to universities. What can we do to get the most out of universities, and how students at Sussex engage when it comes to being comfortable, making the most out of this place. So, to all the listeners from this podcast, we would tell you that your university experience is what you make it. Be proactive, take those risks, and embrace your new experiences. Whether it's joining a student society, taking a role, or just experiencing this wonderful culture, you're at Sussex. Thank you again, Dr. Rashaad, for your time and insights, and also everyone for tuning in. Thank you for listening to the Jubilee Times Open Seminar. Stay engaged, stay curious, and we'll see you next time.